Josephine. We're so glad to have you here with us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Teresa. I'm so excited for our conversation.
I think it's such good timing. Your book, Mindfulness Journal for Parents, again, I think it's such good timing. I have more empathy for parents than I've had that I can remember since I was a parent with kids at home, just because of what everybody's been through in the last year and a half. So I thought it was really a great idea to talk about mindful parenting at this time because unfortunately it looks like we're about to go back through some more stuff. I uh, I really appreciated the way the book is laid out. So obviously it's journals and you have to practice to learn mindfulness. So they were all beautiful prompts. But I also thought it was great that you included real examples of situations with parents and children. So it makes it much more relatable. So I know you have 5 children, so that may answer this question, but what prompted you to write the book?
Yes, and actually, it's seven.
Oh,
As I was
7.
writing, as I was writing the book, two more popped out. Um, what prompted me to write the book, and thank you so much for your kind words about the book. I really appreciate it. Is that I found myself many years back feeling really overwhelmed. I was dealing with a return to work life as well as raising little children. And I just found myself in this swirl of never ending chaos, which, doesn't ever disappear, but it was the way in which I approached life and approached everything that I was dealing with that I knew there was something that had to change because at the end of the day, I I couldn't remember like my interactions with my children. I knew I was with them and I was doing that, I was caring for them, but maybe the things they said or their reactions was just lost upon me. And that just felt so just like I was missing a great deal of life. So I was trying to figure out what I could do when a friend of mine mentioned that I should give mindfulness and meditation a try. And I thought that this wasn't for me. I hear this from my clients all the time. Wasn't for me. Type A, I couldn't turn my mind off, constantly surrounded by post-its. So how could I sit and do something like this? Anyway, she persisted and I'm glad that she did because I tried an app. We're so fortunate to have so many resources. And I just tried it for a few minutes. And in just those few minutes, I noticed that I finally took time out for myself to just reset and to hit the pause button in my day, which is how I like to describe it now for other people. It gives you a chance to refresh yourself, much like we do with our computer and our phones. We all need that as well. And I found that instantly as I was practicing mindfulness meditation, I started to just change within myself, but that translated into my relationship and my interactions with my children and with my family and just everyone in general. And once I saw that happening, it just, a light clicked on, and I knew that I had to continue living this way. And much to just my personality, I had to level it up. I couldn't just leave it as something for myself. I knew that I had to share this with everyone, not just with my friends and family. And that's when I decided to be trained as a meditation teacher. And then ultimately, as I was going through the training program, I thought I should relate this to my own experiences. One, which is infertility, which I do fertility mindfulness, but also with parenting and how other parents and caregivers out there can, build this into their life with really simple, approachable, easy to do strategies and techniques that won't require them to buy into and learn a whole new sort of system of life. Is just tiny little approachable shifts in their day and ways of looking at life that they can incorporate.
Beautiful. Yeah, and I totally agree. And I think your approach with the journaling, they're not, it's not like they have to journal a book. There's like a prompt, to help them think about a situation with their kids, which comes up all the time. I get asked all the time in workshops, what can I do about this? Something to do with their kids. And basically if you're mindful, but you've got to have some kind of an entryway to start practicing, and especially if you're trying to do it with your children, which I think again is so important anyway, but especially right now, these questions are, I think, very reflective and really will help people become more self-aware about maybe where they're operating from. Because like you said,
Yes.
we live in a chaotic world. It is hard to kind of just slow down a minute, and take some time to think through what you're doing, but you're making a difference for the rest of that child's life. So it's great. You
Yes, I
mentioned your
agree.
podcast, so I do want to share with the audience. It's Responding to Life, Talking Health, Fertility, and Parenthood. So I'm sure you can get that anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Yes,
Okay,
exactly. Yeah.
great, great. Um, so one of the things I wanted to ask you about from in the book is you mentioned, and again, I hear this all the time. One of the areas that you talk about is multitasking and what a mistake it is. So could you explain a little bit to our listeners why that is?
Yes. So I'm always juggling so many things. And uh, one of my jobs in my former life was an event planner. So it's constantly multitasking. I had to, by definition, with that job. But what I found with that example that I brought up in the beginning of how at the end of the day, I couldn't remember my interactions with my children or the heart of it, that's when I was multitasking. I was sitting with my newborns and I had my like 6-year old kids asking me things, but I was on my phone. I was checking work emails and I was, answering phones and things like that. So I was multitasking in that moment. Or for example, I'd be cooking dinner and I'd have one child trying to do something with me or asking me something like this, my husband asking me that. I had to shoot off an email as well. And I was doing 100 things at once, which I know everyone listening can relate to. But the problem there is you're so spread thin that you can't really give 100% to one given thing. And when you can't do that, that's when you walk away and you feel sort of empty. Like, what happened there? You can't quite remember. You didn't really fully interact in that moment. And it's one thing when it's something like an email or with your computer, but it's a whole different thing when it's an interaction that you missed with a person, particularly someone in your life, that you're close to. So that's why, I brought up that one example of how multitasking is a mistake because you're not really you're not fully there, and you're not. And the definition of mindfulness, as I like to put it, is just being aware of the present moment, whether that's yourself, how you're feeling, your body, your emotions, how you're interacting with others. And so when you're multitasking, how can you really be completely aware of what's happening to each of those different things, because you're just giving 25% here, 25% there, and you're not giving the 100, and so you can't fully be there. And so if you just it seems like it would take a lot more time to individually do things. But I challenge you and the listeners to practice this and just try doing one thing. And you'll find that it takes a shorter amount of time because you didn't have to do it with 10 other things. So if you're able to just answer the question of your child or play with them for 5 minutes, that's it, right? It took you a shorter amount of time than having to explain to them, wait, I'm doing this. You constantly have to drag it out, right? Instead of just sitting there for those 5 minutes or answering that question. And then they're fine. They're usually just fine. Problem solved. They go off and they don't need you there like 24/7. And then you can go back to what you're doing, say with dinner, and it just gets done faster. So it's challenging, I know, for myself, because it was a hard habit for myself to break. But just try it every now and then, like once a day, and then you'll gradually see how it makes a difference. And once you can see change and how it can impact your life, you'll just want to keep doing it. And so that's how you start.
Great. Yeah, I agree completely. And when we scatter ourselves like that, it's the opposite to me of mindfulness. It's mindlessness because you're doing everything partially, like you said, and then you're not really getting anything done well. So that's fantastic. Um, you talked about some mindfulness barriers. Do you want to share a couple of those with our listeners?
Yes. So when you think of mindfulness, right, we were talking about how you're being aware of it. But then when people start to look into this practice, they find it difficult. And the reason it's difficult is because there are often these barriers. They can be physical, they can just be hypothetical barriers, and things such as scheduling or how you're setting it up, how you're approaching this mindfulness. So for example, with like scheduling. So if you are trying to get into a mindful habit and you want to make a practice of it. So I said is just a few minutes a day. Just do it a few minutes a day. You build up that habit, you build up that access in your brain. But if you are trying to set it up for success, then you should be honest with yourself about when you really can fit it in and when it's best suited for you. So some people are morning people, some people are night people, but then there are night people who want to try and be morning people and that doesn't quite work out, right? So that's kind of a barrier. A barrier would be trying to fit it in, but not being realistic about when you can actually do it. And tying it to something that you already do, habit stacking is a great way of doing it. So trying to just do it on its own might not be as successful. So these are all different barriers that we have, where we could set ourselves up for success, but we're not taking that extra step to do it. So that's an example.
Great, thank you. Yeah, one of the biggest barriers that people create for themselves, from my perspective, is time. So they think that they have to, get this big chunk of time somehow from somewhere, and none of us have that. And so
Right.
I'm glad you brought that up, because you can build a mindfulness practice into everything you're already doing. It doesn't have to take a ton of time, right? Except for meditating, and that again, you can start small. So I
Right.
totally agree with that. Um, you and right now, because in our trainings and workshops and blogs and everything, the biggest thing that keeps coming up is really about uh, people not taking care of themselves because they feel overwhelmed taking care of other people.
Yes.
And so you have a whole section in the book called Giving Yourself a Break, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is very pertinent. But one of them that really struck me, especially again in light of what parents have had to do, like, taking on so many additional roles and trying to do their jobs with kids at home and, everything that's been going on, is perfectionism. And so I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how perfectionism is not the best thing for us.
Yeah, no, I love how you picked out really great ones in there. Um, just a quick note about the book because you brought up a good point. So the way I structured the book in terms of the 7 sections is I start off with just covering what mindfulness is. And that's just in relation to yourself, not even with your children. And then that next section of giving yourself a break is about how we care for ourselves. And so the first few sections are just about us because we've all heard the adage of how we need to take care of ourselves first, put on the oxygen mask first before we can do it for others. And it's true in everything that we do. We can't give from an empty bucket, an empty vessel. And then it shifts over the book into once you're able to care for yourself and have practiced mindfulness on your own, then you're able to apply it to your children and your interactions with them and be conscious with them and communicate mindfully. But to your question about perfectionism, we all have these standards, whether or not we acknowledge them or even realize them. We have all these standards and expectations that we have for our own selves, not even talking about our children, which we have a whole different set for them. But for ourselves, we come upon these throughout life, in things that we do. So perhaps when we were little, we were told to always just be very proper about things, very respectful. And so that just stayed in the back of your mind, whether or not you know it. And so you're always holding yourself to that standard in that regard, or always get good grades, or always be the best child. So that's just always in the back of your mind, whether or not you know it. And it causes you to, it's like leaks out into every interaction that you do and every choice that you make. So my point of challenging this perfectionism is that when you're striving to be like have like this perfect life or this have this perfect interaction, oftentimes life is messy, right? And you can't get to that 100%. But what the problem with that is that it causes this negativity spiral. And then you're down on yourself. And so you're then focused on the negative aspects of not being able to achieve this perfectionism that you have in your mind that you believe is achievable versus appreciating all the great steps that you took trying to get there, the whole journey that you took, the commitment that you made, the hard work that you did to try to get to this point. All of that gets lost. And so when you think that perfectionism is, when you have that in the back of your mind, let's not aim for perfectionism. Let's just aim to be, productive and to try our best and to do what we can. If you have that in the back of your mind, then you're setting yourself up for just more success and you're better able to like witness the journey and appreciate it and be more positive about the whole thing.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me when we teach mindfulness because, or and meditation, mindfulness meditation, because people are even they have an idea of how to be the perfect mindful person or the
All
perfect
right.
meditator, right?
Yes.
And and I have to keep pointing out, no, it's when you notice you messed up that you're building your mindfulness skills. It's exactly
Yes.
the opposite of what you think. But it's hard. People do have very
Yeah.
set beliefs, and you're right. I think many people don't even realize
Yeah.
where they came from. They've had them for their whole lives, and so it takes just that conscious effort to pay attention to what you're doing to
Yes.
yourself to start undoing it. So excellent. um you talk about knowing what you can control, and why do you think that that's important?
Control is such a big word and it has just it's so weighty and oh my goodness. And I myself, I was speaking with someone and it was great because we were having this conversation on control and she brought up the fact that, instead of control, you're trying to think of the things that you can control because before I was telling people, well, figure it out the things that you can control and let go of the things that you can't, because there's so many things in life that we can't control, and this fight that we have to try and do so just creates more negativity, it just creates more problems versus understanding when to let go. That's that the whole sort of mindfulness is that mindset, and it's this underlying framework for how you approach everything. So with things like what can you control, well, you have to be aware to know what things you can let go of, right? But there are definitely things that we can control, such as our breath and our mindset and different things like that. But in talking with her, she said that she made me think about this and that control, when we even just use that word, it puts such pressure on us. And it creates this idea that, well, we need to have control over certain things. Instead, using a simple word, because as I pointed out in the journal, words matter and make such a huge difference. You can change one little thing, and it makes a huge change in your mindset and perspective. So instead of control, how about navigate? Like, let's just navigate through these issues that we're having, or let's try to navigate what's happening today versus let's see what I can control today and what I can let go of. And so I've been personally trying to just shift that word for myself as well, instead of, what can I control today versus just what can I navigate through with the best of intentions, with the best sort of approach and mindset.
I love that because I agree. Control is such an issue, and I actually try to practice thinking I control nothing. So I do navigate everything, so that's great. I also agree with you that words are powerful, and one of the things that I include in a lot of what I do is replacing the word should, and you've got
Mhm.
that in there about the shoulds, and I think that that is, and again, just to make sure everyone understands how this book works, it's really like a workbook, so you can work
Mhm.
through your own feelings. It's not someone telling you how to feel or
Right.
exactly what to do. And that's really the clue to all of this, is that awareness. But when it comes to shoulds, I've actually had people even argue with me and say, we have to have shoulds. And
Hmm.
so I find that curious. We had a long discussion about it, but I'm wondering what you think happens to whether it's our mind or bodies when we use the word should.
Well, there's all the pressure. I'm fascinated. I would love to hear what that conversation was that you had, because I really believe in this idea that changing one simple word can really change your mindset. I mean, let's think about the word no, which is also in the book. That is huge for children. It triggers so many emotions, and if we could just switch it with something else, but with the word should, for adults and even for children, it creates so much pressure and anxiety. Like, I should do this. And then in the back of your mind, you're trying to hold yourself up to this standard, this level of perfectionism of, oh, I should be making these cupcakes from scratch that I'm bringing to the classroom. Well, you don't have to. You get to make these and you get to participate in your child's event at school, and you're lucky to be able to do that. And so you can make a choice of, do I want to make them from scratch or do I want to just buy them based off of what I know I have like the capacity to do today. So that word should is just so loaded, much like the word control. And so I feel like it should just be replaced with I get to or something else given that situation.
Yeah. Yeah, we use could, like just
Mm,
and if you really just say something to yourself both ways, you can feel the difference. I
yes.
should do the dishes versus I
Oh,
could do the dishes, right? Now you have a
yeah.
choice. So it's exactly what you're saying. But it is important because those words, should is such a judgment. Like it feels like such a
Hmm.
self judgment, or in the case of like the person that argued with me, it's a judgment of others. They should be doing something a certain way. A company
Oh,
should be
yes.
doing something.
Right.
So I think sometimes maybe people get shoulds confused with rules or frameworks. It'd be lovely if
Uh,
everyone followed the rules, but they don't. So
right.
instead of throwing should in there, that just makes it even more negative to me because now you're
Yes.
judging either yourself or others. So I'm
Right.
glad you
Right.
included that. Um, oh, another one I wanted to ask you about because I struggle with this with people. I don't struggle with it with myself, but it's the cell phones. And so I see so
Oh,
many parents with their children, but they're on their phones at the same time that they're supposed to be, not supposed to be, where they're supposedly listening or interacting. So,
yes.
what would you say to parents who say, "But I have to check my messages," or I have, what? How do you encourage parents to put it away for a little while?
Yeah, and I have to be completely candid here because put that in there because of myself,
Yeah,
and so I am still it's constantly a work in progress, right? So we
right.
constantly have to do this. So one approach that really worked for me and for other clients is that if I know part of the issue is that I have so many things on my plate and I want to get all these things done, but I feel pressured when I don't feel like I have the opportunity to do it. So, a way to combat that is if I set aside in my actual schedule that I have X amount of time to do this and then X amount of time to interact with my children, then I know that I've had that time. So, whatever 30 minutes, the top three things I may like to do, top three things I have to do that day, a 30-minute or 1 hour block before I schedule in that time with the kids, then I won't feel like my mind is elsewhere. It could, definitely could still, but at least that pressure is off because I had the time to do the stuff, the things that that were part of my top 3 beforehand. And so then when you move on to interacting with your child, that pressure is off. You know that you got it done. You have X amount of time with your children that you can dedicate to them. So you can feel okay about putting the phone down. It's okay. And you can get back to it. And the wonderful part about this too is that children, they really they just want to be with you, right? And if you they hold you to the words that you say. So if you say, "Well, I'm going to play with you and I'm going to play with you as soon as I'm done with this." Well, that's so ambiguous versus saying, "I will play with you at 10:30." And you're stuck to 10:30 and they can actually see what 10:30 is. Hopefully that age group, they can see what it is or set a timer. And so it's more tangible for them and they hold you to it and you have to stay accountable. And it's a great way to really it's still scheduling things in, but that's the way that you're able to have less stress about it and that they are ensured that now they have time with you and it's for this amount of time and then you have to get back to work. And it's just a way of modeling to them as well that you wear this hat, you have to do these things first, that you have a commitment and that you're sticking to it, and then that you have a commitment with them and you're sticking to it. And it's just everything that you do is modeling to them. So this is a great way of showcasing that and a great way of not of relieving the pressure of wearing so many different hats and doing so many things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you said it's modeling because that is the point. I think our children need to see that we don't have to be on devices all of the time and that we need to live up to our commitments. So it's like a twofer. So that makes me happy.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. And then I know we're running out of time, but you talk about one of your chapters is called Cultivating Gratitude, Joy, and Peace. And we've covered quite a bit in this program on gratitude because I think it's so powerful. But one of the exercises or one of the journal prompts is related to 1 year later. So I was
Mm,
wondering if you could just share that with our audience to get some perspective.
yes. So, I wrap up the book by talking about gratitude and appreciation of things because when that's one tool in mindfulness to really help you stay grounded and present and be shift from a state of negativity to one of positivity. And so I thought it would be a great way to wrap up the whole book in that regard. And so one thing, one of the journal prompts in there was to reflect back on or reflect forward, like where do you want to see yourself in a year? And with mindfulness, I'm always telling people to stay in the present moment. Don't think about the past. It's already done. Nothing can change that. Don't think about the future. It hasn't happened yet. But it is okay to think about certain things. It is okay to set goals. It is okay to think about what that future looks like so that you can do the things today. And so that was the whole point of that journal prompt is you did all this work in this book and you're trying to incorporate it into your daily life, hopefully making it a lifestyle because for me mindfulness is a lifestyle. And so in thinking about that, where do you see yourself in a year? Like, how do you hope this will affect and transform yourself and your relationship with your children and your family and others? And that way, when you set your intentions, you know, going forward daily, you have that vision of what that looks like in your mind and written on paper. And so that you can always go back to it and readjust your intentions based off of what it is that you see for this future version of yourself. And it's not like you're living that, you're just always thinking about that and missing everything in the present. You're just using that as sort of this anchor, as this sort of vision that you can look towards to really dictate, how you want to be in this present moment.
Yeah, we actually use intentions and goals because, and the reason I asked you that is because so many people think because I say the same thing. What's the point of worrying about the future? You don't know what's going to happen. Quit rehashing the past. But they mean interpret that to mean then you don't set goals, and goals are so important
Mm,
to success. And so we use also intentions, which you also have in the book, as you set the goal and then put it away because you're going to set an intention every day that's going to lead to that goal, right?
mhm.
And the interesting thing, and I don't know who wrote it, I can't remember anymore. I've read so many books, but I loved it and I've never forgotten it, which is if you live by intentions, then you're living your goals every day instead of it being this far off future thing, you know what I
Beautiful.
mean, that you
Yeah.
may or may not reach. And that motivates me to set intentions every day because it's true. Then you're living your goal, as you
Yes.
work toward it. So
That's
glad you
beautiful.
included that too.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you can think of that might be helpful to parents out there that are trying to be more mindful or that are trying to teach their children how to be mindful?
Yeah. No, we already discussed it very briefly. Is just try it for yourself so that you can then model it for your children. And by trying mindfulness, it's merely just a few minutes of your day when you best can fit it in. If you can schedule into your calendar and stack it onto an existing habit that's, you do every day, all the better for success. And it can be something as simple as picking up the book and looking at a journal prompt so that you're asking yourself these questions. Mindfulness is really this awareness. And when you're aware, you're constantly asking yourself questions like, why did I do this? Or what's happening here? Why am I feeling this way? It's this constant dialogue. That's what you're aiming towards is this constant awareness, but that in, involves this conversation with yourself. So, whether it's that or whether it's sitting for meditation, using an app or something like that, but just a few minutes a day so that you start to create a lifestyle of mindfulness and awareness. And you start to really build up that neural pathway in your brain that goes towards this type of thinking, this type of mindset versus doing sort of the things that you were doing in the past. And so it allows you to dismantle old approaches and rebuild from this place of awareness. And so that would be my advice for how to give this a shot and how to then once you're able to do that, then you're able to help your children do it. And there are exercises in the book that you can do with your children, but really they learn from us. So when they see you doing it, and don't be shy about it, just, really like talk about it that you're doing this and let them see that you're doing it. That's what I do with my children. So they just know that's just a part of life for them that they see mommy doing this. And sometimes she asks them to join along. So that's how you can start.
And so the name of the book is Mindfulness Journal for Parents: Prompts and Practices to Stay Calm, Present, and Connected. And I think that's the perfect summary of what we all need in life right now. So I thank you and congratulate you on the book. And I hope people really take this to heart and consider ways that this could really not it's not about improving your parenting. To me it's about enhancing your parenting, or
Mhm.
really getting to experience the richness of all of the experiences with children, which sometimes can feel overwhelming. So thank
Yes,
you very much for
exactly.
joining us and for writing the book.
Oh, thanks so much, Teresa, for having me on. It was a pleasure speaking about the book. You can buy it on Amazon or any major retailer. And there's also an online companion course that I created. You can look at that at mindfulparentclass.com. And it has video guidance for many of the exercises, especially helpful if you're new to mindfulness and meditation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.